Check. So if you can, if you will, not that you can, I need everybody to go to our session 8 and the files that are inside your assignment folder for session 8. So Will, do you have access to these assignment files? Okay, so you can do this, right? Yeah, okay. I didn't know what got lost. I don't know what you have access to anymore, so I just want to make sure. If you need it, I can give you access to everything. We'll just copy stuff over, whatever you need, okay? All right, so in the assignment folder, I want to start with the Liquify version of it. I want to go over that part first. So if you can open that in Photoshop. Okay. So in doing this, I'm just going to show you really quickly the problem that you run into just attacking this straight on. So we're going to start. I'm going to move through this relatively quickly, but not so quick. If you get lost or whatever, just stop me. I'm going to start off by just making a quick copy of this, Command J. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a smart object because that's what we would normally do if we were going to liquefy. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects and convert to smart object. And you'll see that we get that little strange icon at the lower right-hand corner of this, which tells me it's a smart object. And the reason I do this is that liquefying is a transform and it is destructive. If you do it on a regular non-smart object normal layer, then every move that you make in there is a destructive move. If you do it as a smart object, remember that image is sitting inside a protective envelope and it gives you the illusion of making the transforms, but the image that's on the inside is all still safe and sound. And you can go back and you can remove the transforming, you can actually add to it, you can amend it, you can continue to work on it forever and it never will become destructive. That's the advantage of doing them. So that's how we're going to work. So anyway, I'm going to just then come into the Liquify menu, come up to the Filter menu, down to Liquify. And then I'm going to grab the top tool on the top left hand, part of my screen. It is the Forward Warp tool. I'm going to use my bracket keys to make the tool much larger. Then in terms of the properties, if you look over here, remember that density refers to hardness. So this is how hard your brush is. I'm going to make my brush a medium hardness on that. So what happens if you take a look at my screen and just take a look at my brush size right here, is the hardness of the brush controls how much or where the effect is at its strongest. And just like any brush, the very center of this brush is going to have the most profound effect. It has the strongest effect. So if you put the center of your brush right over the edge of her back hump and click and drag in, you can see it's an aggressive brush. However, if you hit Command Z to undo that, instead put the edge of your brush now on that and do the same thing, and you can see it's a much subtler movement in here. And the reason that is that because the brush fades as it goes from the center to the edge. So the effect fades. It's more pronounced in the center, far less pronounced sort of toward the edges. So that's one clue about how it works. However, if you continue to do this part and, well, here, and you get it into even something close, look at what has happened to my background. I am completely distorting the background, and that curve that you see on this background distortion, this thing right in here, is classic Liquify. People can spot that from Zanzibar and look at it and say, yep, that's all liquefied, right? So that's really not a successful move for us. So instead, we're going to cancel out of this. We are going to throw this layer away. We're going to just start from scratch. All right, so to do that, what I really need to do is I've got to separate the girl from the background. This is not unlike the approach that you take to doing lighting in the photo studio. If you can separate your subject from your background, you can control the lighting on both of them independently. Well, the same thing happens when you're retouching. And so that's going to be the goal that we have in here. So our first move on here is to go ahead and make a copy of this, Command J. And then I actually want to make a copy of I want to isolate the figure. I want to cut the figure out of all of this so that I can create a background that has no figure in it. So that's going to be my goal. So to separate the figure from this, I am just going to come up to the Select menu, down to Subject. And it should go through its process. You should see occasionally a little thing that'll come up. We're now using, this is an AI selection. This is now because of the way we set up our preferences on the very first day of class. This is actually not done locally. This is done by Adobe servers. So this has been sent up to Adobe, to the cloud. They've actually done the knockout and sent it back down to us, which is fine. So I'm going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. So you can now see, if you turn everybody else off, that you've got just a figure that's sitting on a transparent layer, which is exactly what we want, because this way we can do the transform without distorting anything else. However, if you turn on your middle layer and turn off the eyeball for the one that's on the top and select the middle layer, I'm going to double click on that layer number 1 and rename it New Background. Now I need to remove this figure. So we're going to do this in 2 different ways. We are going to do old school and new school. So in order to get rid of the figure on this, first we need to select it. So I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did. I'm going to go up to the Select menu and come down to Select Subject. And I will get the marching ants on this thing again. However, if you zoom in on this, you can see the selection is running right along her body, which is exactly what you would want it to do. But if we are going to use either AI or content-aware fill to actually remove this figure, we need it to select some of the background. If we keep this perfect selection like this, you will end up with a ghost outline of this figure, which is not going to actually work for us. So I need my selection to be larger. I don't want to do this with a lasso tool. Again, it was just too easy to make the selection of here, but I need to make it bigger. So to do that, come up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Expand. So again, look at my screen, Select menu, Modify, Expand. A dialog box will open up, and I'm going to put in 10 pixels and hit OK. Now, looking at this, I don't think that's enough. I think it's too tight. Again, the expansion all depends on the numbers that we put in here, all depend on the resolution of the file. And if it's a high-res file, then 10 pixels doesn't expand a lot. If it's a really low-res file, 10 pixels can expand huge amounts. So at any rate, but this isn't enough for me, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it. I don't need to get rid of the marching ants, just undo the expand, and then go right back into it and do it a second time, but we're going to change the value. Up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Expand, and type in 20, and hit OK. Now, this looks good to me, so I'm going to go with this. Matter of fact, but if it wasn't good enough for me, again, I would just hit Command Z, go back into do the whole process over again, try 30 pixels. I mean, you can do this over and over and over until it gets to be the way you want it actually to be. So I like the way this looks right now. I'm going to do the old school version of this first. I'm actually going to come up to the Edit menu, down to Content Aware Fill. This was the first of the local AIs that Adobe started. So when you do that, you come into a new space. You come into the Content Aware Fill space. You have 2 screens going on right now. You have a preview screen. This is showing you what the results are right now if you don't change anything. If you come over and you take a look at the other screen, though, this other screen is your image, but it's got information on it that you need. Now, on this other screen, I'm going to click on this to make it active, and then I'm going to hold down my keyboard shortcuts to actually get to zoom back in. So spacebar Command Option will give me the negative magnifying glass, and I can drop out so that I can see the whole thing. So what this is showing you is all of the area in green is now area that Photoshop is using to do the content aware fill. So you can see that the results of this don't look too bad. However, you can change this. You can say, well, I want content aware fill to use everything that's in here. So you have a brush. By default, you've got a brush. It's the very top tool on the left-hand side. This brush allows you to modify this green. The green covers the area that Photoshop is using to generate this fill. So for instance, we could actually change this. So there's a spot right here that Photoshop is not using. I can paint across this and you'll notice it's actually revealing more. So what that's telling Photoshop is that do not use this area that I just uncovered. Do not use this area when you are trying to figure out the content aware fill. But look what happened. This has now got these blue lines that are running down along the bottom just got brought up here into the top. They don't belong there. This is actually a light streak in a lens. They don't belong up in here. So that move was a bad one. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it, and you'll see they largely go away. Same thing happens if I if I open up these guys down here. If I open up that part, it actually does a better job. It gets rid of the part that's up in the top, the blue that's up in the top. So I kind of like that. However, you can also add to the selection here. So if I wanted to add this little section of canvas up here, I wanted to add that, you simply hold down your Option key and it will change the little minus part inside your brush to a plus, and now you can actually include it in, and you can see it changes the image again. Now in my case, I don't like what that did, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. But this is looking better for me. However, this is not the only controls that you have in Content Aware. If you come over to the Properties panel that's on the right-hand side, you can open up the sampling overlay area right here. This will allow you to control how you see the area that Photoshop is using or not. So the color right now, it's a green cast that's on the area that Photoshop is considering. You can change that depending on what's actually going on. So basically, this is just controlling that, the overlay of this. However, the things that are down underneath that in the fill settings do matter, and changing them can have a profound impact on your image. So if you click on color adaptation, it's set to default right now. If you click on that drop-down menu, you can go back to none and then just look to see if you're happier with what it did to the background or not. In my case, I don't think that was an improvement. So I'm going to then skip over default because I know what that already looks like, and I'm going to go to high. And in the high part, I actually think that that's really close to the default, so I don't know that there's much difference. And then I'm going to go to very high. And you can see it's sort of like smudging this. It's making this way, way, way softer. I don't like any of those. So I'm going to go back to the default and see what that looks like again. For me, I think that this is the nicest part of it. So I'm going to keep this set up the way it is right now. However, you also have rotation, and then the rotation adaptation, what this does is it actually rotates the content aware fill. So if you go to low, it's a small rotation, and you can see it will change your image. Do you like that better, or do you like that worse? I feel like I'm getting this pattern down here that I don't want to get, and also this black thing. This is going to be behind the figure, so I don't know that it's that bad, but I don't see that as an improvement. So then I'm going to try medium. And you'll see this little spinning wheel down here at the bottom. That's telling you that it's actually doing the processing for this. That certainly didn't help me. That's starting to bring in all this wavy shit in the background, so I'm not thrilled about that. I'll try high. Nope. And then full.
Mine gives me a warning message each time being like unexpected results.
Yeah, so if you don't want to see that anymore, there's a little check mark you can click that says, don't show this again, because it'll do that for the rest of your life. So at any rate, I'm going to go back to none for my rotation. And this is a good start for me, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. So then in the drop-down output settings right here, you have options. You can actually do the new content aware part to a brand new layer. You can do it to the current layer, or you can make a duplicate of the whole layer and add this to it. So I'm just going to do this to my current layer because, again, I've made a copy of it. And then I'm going to hit OK. So this is now actually what I've got. I've still got marching ants on this. Command D to deselect that part. So then you can actually hit this a second time. I'm going to hit the L key to get a lasso tool. I'm going to come around this really super highlight that's sitting right here, and then just run Content Aware Fill again, up to the Edit menu, down to Content Aware Fill. The same thing will begin to happen in here. Now in this case, I want to add to the area that I feel like it should be considering for all of this. So you can just hold down your Option key and start to paint in the rest of all of this area, and this over on the other side as well, because you're now telling Photoshop, I want you to look at all of this area around here, and I want you to create something for me that fits in using all of that area over there. And I like this better. I think it's more consistent with the rest of the image. So this is going to be my new background. I'm going to go ahead and say again, we're going to do this output to the current layer. I'm going to say OK to that. Command D to deselect. And then I'm going to turn on my figure, and I'm going to save this. Not save this. I'm going to do a history snapshot of this. So come over to your history palette, click on the little camera that's at the bottom. It'll open up, and we're just going to call this Content Aware Fill. And say OK to that. Then if you look at your history panel, you can see that there is a place that we can go back to where it said, I want to get rid of again, I've got a history snapshot of what this image looks like right now. So I don't need to keep these history states. So I'm going to go back to the place where it said expand. So I'm coming all the way back here. It's still on this new background. My top one is actually turned off. And now I'm going to use generative fill to see if I can't get rid of this as well. So there's two ways that you can actually do generative fill. The first is you can come up to the edit menu and come down to generative fill. It is a menu item. And open it up, and you'll take a look at it right here, and you can control it here. Or you can actually use the contextual task bar. If you're not seeing it, if you don't see it, come up to your window menu and come all the way down to contextual taskbar. It opens up this thing that doesn't seem to ever want to go away, or ever, never seems to be. It's always in the wrong place. So we have options here. The first option that we can try is simply remove. So again, I've got a selection that's sitting here. I'm going to click on the remove tool. And then that's it. What you'll see here is that when you say remove, it actually adds another layer on here of that figure. I'm going to do a snapshot of this one in history as well. Come over to your camera and click on the little camera at the bottom of the history thing, and we're going to call it remove. And say OK. And then go back one step in history. We're going to undo the remove. We've still got marching ants. It still is expanded. We're going to use the other option in generative fill. So to use that, you click on the word in the contextual toolbar, generative fill. It'll actually expand, and it's here. It's like asking, it's now ready for you to put in a prompt. When you're removing stuff, you leave the prompt empty. You don't put anything in here. However, if you look to the right of that, you can control certain things about what AI is used to do this. So if you look, the very first little icon as you come over is a reference image. That's not what you would want to use. But Eli, this goes to when you are actually doing your AI stuff, you have got an image of that glass that's swirling the illustration that you really like. You would actually load that as a reference image, and then you would put in a prompt into all of this saying, I really like the illustrative look of this. I want it to be hyper-colored like this. I want it to be swirling. I want that effect, whatever. But you're giving it a visual and saying, this is a reference that you can look at to see what I'm talking about. So anyway, that's not the only AI that accepts reference images. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that part because I thought about it when you were talking about it. However, if you clicked in the next icon over, the one that says FI, this actually stands for Firefly, and this opens up and it shows you all the available models that you can use to do AI inside of Photoshop. Now, the top three that are sitting at the very top, these are all Adobe models. These are the Firefly models. The Firefly 1 was the first thing that was introduced into Photoshop. Firefly 3 has been the one that's actually current until just this last January, and that's when they released. This is Firefly. The one that's called Fill and Expand is actually Firefly 5. This is the one that you want to be using right now. If you click on that again and open it up, these other models that are down here, the 2 Flux and the 2 Gemini models, you don't have access to that. And the reason you don't is that we are on an educational account. These take credits. You have to pay for these. So if you use these, again, the school does not want to manage your account with Adobe in terms of how you're getting billed for credits. So these are not available to us. However, being the subversive person that I am, I have built a panel that when we get to the AI part of this class in a couple of weeks, that will actually allow you to add all of the Gemini ones that are at the bottom. You have to create an account in Gemini, but the accounts right now are currently free. So at any rate, you will be able to use those. And in my opinion, to be honest with you, the Gemini 3 Nano Banana Pro is hands down the best image AI that's out there right now. Now, obviously, those things can change, but nonetheless. So you are going to get you're going to get 2 of these back. You're not going to get the Flux ones, though. So at any rate, I'm going to select the one at the very top, Firefly Fill and Expand. And again, you don't put anything in the prompt part here. You simply click Generate.
Question for like the bottle with the splashes, would I just select the bottle or the whole image?
Oh, the whole image.
And then just say don't change the bottle?
So,
Because I feel like I've tried prompting Gemini before and I'm like very specific with words and it'll put like, I'll say remove hairs and then it'll put a picture of a cat.
right. So again, you can control that in Gemini. We're going to get to that in a couple of weeks. But if you want to do that beforehand, you and I need to meet outside of this to talk about that sooner than later. But we will get to that. So at any rate, so I get this result. If you look at your properties panel at the top, you don't just have one result, you've actually got 3. So there are 3 variations that are sitting up at the top. I'm going to click the second variation because I don't really like the first one. The second one is pretty good. The seam that seems to be running down here is going to be covered by the figure, so it's not bad. I'm going to look at the third variation right here. This just looks too fuzzy around all of this, so I'm actually going to go with the second one, the one that's in the middle. However, if you're not happy with any of these, you can simply click the Generate button again up at the very top, and it'll do a brand new set of 3 based on not being influenced by any of these that are sitting down here. However, if you have one of these that is sitting down here, variation that you like, kind of, but it's not perfect, you just want to continue to generate something that looks like that, you use the little 3 dots that are right in the top corner, the top right-hand corner of the thumbnail. If you click on that, you will get an option to do Generate Similar. So what it'll do is it'll say, okay, well, they like this one the best, so I'm going to skew from this one. So I'm going to click on Generate Similar, and it will do 3 more versions of this for you. And you can do this infinitely.
What user, did you use the first option or the third option?
I used the middle one, but again, yours are totally different than mine.
Mine look weird.
They can look weird. So then you would just hit the Generate button up at the very top because you don't like any of them. You want them to do a whole new set. Is that true? Yeah, so then just click the one up at the very top. So I've got a next generation of mine right now, so I'm going to look through that next generation, and I'm pretty much okay with this third one in the middle. I like this one in the middle, and again, the figure is going to cover the most part of this all. So this is the one that I'm going to actually go with. So I've clicked on this, and you can see it shows up as a layer in here. Now, I want this layer to merge with the version that's down underneath it. It has a layer mask on it right now. If you hold down the Option key and just click on this, hold down the Shift key and click on the mask, you can see that it's actually a much larger thing. This is what I want to merge down into my background. So I'm going to throw the mask away. And then I'm going to simply merge this down. Command E will do a merge down. You actually have to have the image underneath it visible. So then Command E will actually merge it down. And this is going to be my new background. Yes?
I had a question. I got an error saying that what I was trying to do wasn't within community guidelines
Really?
for this.
Yeah.
That happens a lot with like really weird stuff.
Yeah, well, anyway. Did you get any generation?
At the beginning when we did the snapshots, but not.
So wait, when we did the content aware fill, you got that, but you didn't, when you did the first AI, when you did remove, did anything happen?
Yeah, but it didn't remove the figure. It just like put it different. It put like other things, like a lamppost, a monkey head.
Are you using, so wait, in your, so if we go back to the generative fill part, so I'm gonna actually just do a quick selection here. And generative fill, did you pick this version of Photoshop up here at the very top, the fill and expand? And it gave you a monkey instead of doing any removal?
No, that one was okay, but the bottom two like did not work.
Okay, well, no, but the bottom two you don't want to use. They're old and they do exactly what they hallucinate. They do exactly what you were worried about. I would not use those other two ever again in my life. They don't even have to be in Photoshop as far as I'm concerned, because they do exactly what you're saying. You'll say, yeah, I want to, make the ground look wet, and all of a sudden it's like, God coming out of the cloud or something, or an elephant, or, it has, yeah, anyway, so, yeah. All right, so anyway, I'm okay with this. And so this is the version that I'm going to keep. I'm going to snapshot this. So over in history, click on the little camera at the bottom, snapshot it, and we're going to call this AI. And say OK to that. To get rid of your contextual toolbar, if you don't want to keep it, simply click on the little three dots that are on the far right-hand side and hit hide bar. Or what a lot of people do is they'll actually take this up into an area up at the very top of their screen and pin it up here. So you can leave it up here, click on the little three dots, and you can just say, pin this to this position, and it will stay there. The reason that it keeps moving around is that it keeps trying to give you options for what it thinks you're trying to do, and it wants to put it right next to what it is you're going to do. So again, select subject. You would want to do that if you were hovering right over the subject. So anyway, I'm going to now check out and see which of these I like. So I'm going to go all the way up to the very top of my history palette. I'm going to click on the content aware part in the beginning, the content aware fill version. Then I'm going to click on the remove version. In the remove version, I don't have the figure turned on. So I'm going to turn on the figure, and I'm going to do one more snapshot and call this remove 2, because I want to be able to see that. And say, okay, you can actually throw history states away. So I'm going to throw away the original history state where the figure was not turned on. And then again, now I can take a look at it. So this is the remove tool. This is content aware, remove, and then this is AI. Now the AI version and the content aware version the AI and the remove tool almost look identical. There's a small shift in something up by her hand. So I'm just going to see what the difference is. And so for me, I actually like the remove tool better than what the AI version of this did. They did a pretty good version though. So that's what I'm going to stick with. I'm just going to leave it as the remove tool here. And so then we can continue to work on this. So if I'm on that, again, I've got this remove tool as a separate layer. I want to merge it down so that my background is clean. So Command E will merge it down. So now I've got a figure on top of a new background with my virgin sitting down at the very bottom. And I'm ready to go to work on this. Is everybody sort of with me on this? All right, so on the very top figure, you want to select it. And now we're going to do what we just did before. We're going to come up to the layer menu. We're going to turn it into a smart object, down to smart objects and convert to smart object. And then we are going to liquefy it. So with that layer selected, up to the filter menu, down to liquefy. And then the trick to doing liquefy, again, is that you want to use as many small movements as you possibly can. So I'm going to firm my brush up a little bit more. I'm going to take it up to more like a 75. Again, I'm still using the push forward tool, the one at the very top on left-hand side. I'm going to bump it up to a 75. It just gives me a little bit more immediate control. I'm going to zoom into this area over here and then watch what I do here really quickly. I'm going to start at the area that needs the most correction, and I'm just going to start tapping and pulling slightly in. And you see as I start to tap, pull slightly in, there's a change that's being made, but it's also showing me the background behind this. Now, how many of you guys are on a transparent layer here in Liquify? Anybody? Okay, we need to change that. Go to your properties panel on the side. You want to open up the view options at it's the very bottom part that'll open up. And then you want to turn on show backdrop. And then in the drop-down menu, you want to pick new background. You don't want to pick all of these because it'll show everything. You just want to show the new background. And when you do that, this is now your image on the new background. Now you need the background. You can actually place the background in front of your image. In our case, we don't want that. We want it behind the image. And then you can also ghost this back. You can use an opacity slider that will actually shift what your image is actually looking like so that you can look through it and see what's going on in the background without leaving the Liquify working space. But, so I'm going to turn show backdrop on, use new background. This is was the layer that we named, the one that we fixed using AI. Leave it as behind and 100% opacity. And now you should be able to see everything that you're trying to do. Did that work for everyone? All right, so then again, all I'm doing, guys, is slowly tapping. Look at my screen up here. You can see I'm working my way up and down on all of this, and I'm slowly tapping just to kind of push this in. You don't want to try to do this in one single move. And then I reach a point where I need to actually get more fine-tuned about it. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm actually going to zoom in as well. So I've got this additional hump right here that I just want to take care of that. So again, smaller brush, but then, and also I'm going to do the part that's right by her neck. And again, continue to work your way up and down. Don't stay in one spot too long.
Are we trying to get rid of the hump completely?
Yep, and then I'm going to go back to a much larger brush because again, I've smoothed that part out and continue to work my way doing that. So when you say, completely get rid of it, I'm just trying to make it look normal. And I realize that normal is a dirty word in art school, but.
My liquify brush is not working. I don't know why.
Can I just say one thing? I am no happier being in this room right now with that beautiful day out there than anyone else in this room. I just wanted everybody to know that. Take your opacity, slide it all the way up, all the way up, all the way up. Good, hang on, you're all layers, you're not using all layers, click on the drop down and use your background, your new copy. Good, just like that, so you were seriously doing something. No, but wait, you didn't need to go there, you could just have reset it there. Because that's reset all these. Yeah, you're good. You're good. And now zoom in, bigger brush, and again, start working with using the edge of your brush. You're starting in the very middle. You're moving all of this in here. Start on the outside and work your way in. Small movements and a lot of them.
If my background starts to become distorted.
Say what?
My background is distorting.
So then you didn't separate the two. So hit cancel out of here.
Okay.
And show me your layers. You're working on the wrong one. So this guy you need to merge down to kill the figure. Command E. And then click on this one and make it a smart object. Layer. Layer. Down to smart object, convert to smart object. Good. And then liquify. No, but once you get in there, you're also going to need to get set up in there. So go all the way down and turn on that show background, and then in terms of use, it's not background, it's gonna be your new background. Yeah, and then behind, and then 100%, and then you're set up now.
Okay.
And now when you do the liquify, you will see, you won't distort the background.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go after the same thing here on the back side. However, on the back side, you can use a different tool. So for this area that's back in here, you can actually use the push to the left tool. So if you look at your tool set that's on this side, it's the one that's pretty much right in the middle. It looks like there's a checkerboard on both sides with an arrow that's pointing to the left. If you click on this tool, again, remember the way this tool works. If you click and drag up, it pushes to the left. So I can continue to do this to take the whole thing in. I don't need to do that run down the same way I did the back because it takes a considerably longer time to do that. But I'm doing this in small stages. I'm not trying to hit this too hard. So again, I'm just going to continue to work this part in. Now I'm worried about actually impacting now pushing in her waist. Because again, watch what happens with my tool. As I continue to come up like this, I'm starting to get, her booty in there is actually starting to push in, but my brush now is actually hitting the back of her, the upper part of her back above her waist. I don't want to change that part, so I'm going to freeze that part up there. To do that, it's the tool right underneath it. This is the freeze tool. It's the one that looks like a brush. Again, for this, if you click and do something, you will get this warning that comes on, and it says the Show Mask checkbox is preventing preview of this. And I'll say, oh, sure, okay, I remember. Say okay to that. And then click on Show Mask. This is this button right here. And now you'll be able to see where you're freezing this image. And I want to freeze her entire back. I don't want this part to move. Now again, I don't like looking at this thing, so I'm going to uncheck the Show Mask, but it's still there. And then I'm going to go back to the push to the left tool and just continue to slowly work my way in.
How did you freeze it?
So the tool right underneath the one we're working on, it looks like a paintbrush. And again, if you try to paint on something, you'll get this warning if it isn't turned on. You have to turn on the Show Mask to actually be able to see it. And then if you want to modify, like I put a dot down on there, not that it really matters because I'm not liquefying that, but you use the tool right underneath it to modify your mask. It's the erase or the thaw tool. And when you use this, you can actually unfreeze stuff. So if I wanted to actually go back and work on her top shoulders, then I could unfreeze that part. But I'm going to continue on the push to the left tool. And it's falling in pretty well right now. I'm going to go to the forward warp tool again and just try to work on this area that's sitting right here at the very top. Again, really small motions. And then I'm going to go back to the push to the left tool. And then what a lot of people don't figure in all of this is that the front of her body is also distorted. So if I want to use the push to the left tool over on this side, if I start down, everybody look at my screen really quickly. If I start down here and click and go up, it actually pushes it to the left. That's not what I want to do. Instead, you pull down. So this will actually push it in the opposite direction. It pushes to the right. But it sort of keeps the contouring of it all. And that's my image. If you want to see what you did, you can turn the preview checkbox on and off. If you want to check to see how much you've really distorted all of this, you can actually turn on the show mesh and you will see the areas. If you take a look up at your screen, you can see these areas that have been really distorted. This is the part that if you see something really looks like a hurricane swirling around in here, that's the problem, is that this is going to point you to that. But you can see in these cases, these are really nice, small, these are relatively small, smooth transitions that are going through all of this. They're not in these really gigantic moves in here. This thing down at the very bottom explains the flip out of the bottom of her, I don't know what the hell you call this thing, her tunic. But anyway, show mesh can actually help you spot some problems. But I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And this is it. Questions about any of this? Sure. When we did the original demo of this, we rebuilt fruit. Oh, but it does massive other things. You can do buildings with this, trees with this, cars with this. You can do anything that you need to modify, you can modify.
Can you fix like, well, if you don't have a tilt shift lens and you're doing like architecture stuff, can you?
This is not the way you would use to do perspective, but we will talk about doing perspective warp. That happens almost in the last class. If you need it sooner than that, let me know. Okay, I'm going to close this guy up. We've done all this. I think it's a great time for a break right now, guys. It's 2:25. Make it a hard 10, and please make it a hard 10 today. We've got so much shit that we have got to get through. 2:35, I need you back in here. Okay, guys. Hello. So we're going to go after the green screen one, other version of that file really quickly. We're not going to do this whole thing top to bottom, but I want to go through enough of it for you guys to understand exactly, make sure that everybody's comfortable with all the steps that we take to do that. So if you can open this guy up into Photoshop as well. Okay, so to separate this from the background, we are going to use our zero selective color action. So go to your actions palette. You need to find the zero selective color. Again, we've made this 2 or 3 times now. If you don't have it, let me know and we will make it again for you at a certain point so that you do have it. But right now, I'm going to click on it and run it. And you'll see that in my case, it ends up giving me a solarized like looking image. That's only because I need to have the absolute radio button checked in my selective color as opposed to relative. Yes?
Oh, I can't do anything.
Then try this. Try closing that image and see if you get the same box. Try closing the liquify one first. You're going to have to force cut this, and you might as well go ahead and force cut your whole computer because it'll just, but, yeah, try and quit.
Is your liquify tool also dragging?
Yeah, so if your liquify tool drags again, you got to turn off the acceleration of your graphics card. Yeah, restart your whole computer before you do anything else.
Just turn it off?
Yeah, I would. That's what I would do. And because what you're hoping is that save save your work file is going to kick in for you. But I mean, you're stuck. So Eli, what you're asking about is that if your liquify tool gets really glitchy, you come up to if you're on Macintosh, it's Photoshop settings. If you're on Windows, it's edit down to preferences, but click on settings and down to performance. And you want to uncheck use graphic processor and it will smooth that tool out. Things will work much slower, so you need to remember, if you do this, you need to remember to go back and turn this thing on the minute you stop doing your liquify work.
So turn it off the liquify?
Say what?
You said turn it off the liquify?
Yes. It's only if your liquify is getting glitchy, because then things will radically slow down. Okay. If you do get this solarized looking thing, you simply want to click on absolute instead of relative color metric and it makes it all dark. And then we are going to click on the drop down menu the default is red. You want to come down to greens and you want to take the black slider that's all the way to the right, and you want to drag it all the way to the left, and it will actually make your image. We're starting to create a layer mask for this. Then I zoom in and take a look at the hair. This is the part that's really important. If you take a look at the top of her head, there's all these like little fine hairs. We don't want to lose those guys. So now to actually try to make the zero selective color action more efficient, if we can increase the saturation of the green, then the impact becomes more extreme. So you want to click on the hue saturation layer that's underneath the selective color one, grab the targeting adjustment tool. It's the up by the little preset drop down menu part. It's the hand that's got arrows that are pointing left and right. Click on that and then hover over your image. You will get a eyedropper tool. And if you click, it will select the color of your green. And then as you drag to the right, it will saturate your image. As you drag to the left, it will desaturate your image. In our case, we're going to start to drag this up, but immediately I run into a problem. I'm only up at a saturation of a plus 25, but look at my screen. Look at all of these, see these hairs here that have actually flipped. They're actually lighter than the background. That is going to cause me an enormous world of hurt, and I'm going to lose them all. So you cannot, in this particular image, you cannot saturate it at all. You've got to bring your saturation back down to 0. And even then, some of this still exists. But without any more saturation, whatever at all, at least I've got the best shot of what's going on here. So I'm going to just accept this like this. Again, in other images, you can take that saturation all the way and you will you won't impact any of your image. But in this case, every single image is unique and individual. So I'm going to then come down to my channels palette, and it doesn't matter which of the RGB channels you actually select and make a copy of. So I'm just going to grab the blue one and drag it down to the icon at the bottom of my channels palette. That's the square with the little plus. I'm going to double click on that and rename it Knockout. And then I'm just going to put down my color sampler points and run levels on this. So if you take a look, I'm going to grab my color sampler tool. It's the eyedropper on your toolbar. Click on the lower right-hand corner to get the flyout menu, and you're going to pick color sampler tool, not the eyedropper tool, but the color sampler tool. Make sure that you do have a 3x3 average, not a point sample. And I'm just going to click on a point in the background. However, I know this because I've worked with this image so often. If you come down and you look at her body, she is wearing a necklace, and most of her body has gone black, but there's a necklace on here that has not. That is where I'm also going to drop a point down. I'm going to pick the very lightest part of that one bead and drop a point right there because I need that part to actually go black. So I'm going to get the background to go white and this figure to go black. Now, both of these adjustment layers that are over in your layers palette, they've done their work. You don't need to keep them anymore. Throw them away. They're only going to confuse you in terms of what's going on in this palette right here. Now, when I do that, I can see that, yeah, that's actually pretty good right there. Okay, so I'm going to come back down to my knockout. That's what I'm going to ultimately work on. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out, and I'm going to run levels on this, Command L. And then remember, in the drop down menu, your readouts right here, my point number 1 is right here, and I've got a point number 2 up here, and then I got a point number 3 right here. My 2 is my background. This is this point number 1 I've got is an old one. So again, this point number 2 that's up on the top, I'm going to click on the eyedropper in my info readout and change it from actual color down to RGB, and I'm going to do the same thing for my point number 3.
Did you save the knockout channel?
I just made a copy of the blue channel. But you need a copy of it when you've still got those adjustment layers in effect. Right? All right, so again, click on this top layer. And you need to, you can't even see it, scroll your layers palette down. Yeah, hang on.
I did the zero selective color action. I played it. Oh.
Yeah, you just hit it a second time though. Let's go back to the very beginning when you just opened this image. So So in history, go all the way to the very top. All the way to the top. And just click on that. And then find your action, your zero selected color action, and just run it once. No.
Is that right?
Try the one that's underneath it. Click on that and then just run it. Yeah, and that's correct. And then click on absolute. Good. And then you're going to go to your green and drag the black all the way back. And then you're going to come down here to the blue channel and drag it on top of the plus with and rename that knockout. And then just get rid of both of those letters. You can hit the delete key, it'll get rid of both of them. Yeah. And then you're going to select that and then again put down your points. And the reason this is red right now is because you've got the whole channel turned on, turn that eyeball off. And then make sure, yeah, you're down on the very bottom and make sure that everybody's active. You need to make sure that's the only one that's active. And then put down your
My
points.
points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to grab my white point slider first and drag it towards the middle. And again, I'm just watching the readout over here of my point number 2. That's again, because I started with, already had a point. And I just want to get close. I want to get this close to 255, but stop short of that. Go to my arrow keys and tap it in till I only get exactly what I need, the minimum I need to get to 255. In my black point that's on those the beads that are on her necklace, whatever, they've now actually climbed up to 48. I'm going to grab my black point and I'm going to take it over and get close to 0, stop, and then go to my arrow keys. Revisit your white point. You'll see you actually picked up a part of that. It's now a 254. So I'm going to go back to my white point and again go to my arrow keys. And then I'm at 255 on my background and 0 on this figure. I'm going to zoom in and take a look at this. I want to see how much damage I'm doing to this hair. So I'm looking at her hair right now. If you use your preview check mark and turn it on and off, you'll see what you're keeping and what you're losing in here. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. However, realize there is a midpoint slider between your highlight and your shadow point underneath your histogram. You can move that around to try to bump up those mid-tone levels a little bit. So I'm going to pop mine slightly over. It's making the this part of the hair that's right over here just slightly darker. Yeah, and I think that's actually a better move there. So that's how I'm going to keep mine. Again, just do a quick check on and off. That all looks pretty clean. And then say OK. Double click on the hand. Now, I know this only because I've been working with this image. If you zoom into the area that's actually between her legs, you will see that there is some stuff down in here that still might be slightly... No, that's actually gotten pretty cleaned out. So we're good to go on this. However, I need to get this stuff fixed around her feet. So you have options. You can go after this with the pen tool, but those shoes are so dark right now, and the background of the floor is actually not, that I think I can get away using my overlay brush to do this. So I am going to go to a tablet at this point, and I'll probably be working on a tablet for the rest of the day today. I'll wait for you guys to actually get yours out. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the B key to get an overlay brush. I'm gonna change the hardness of this brush to 100%. I'm gonna click on the blending mode of it and change it down to overlay, 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm just gonna hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to black and white. You want white to be your foreground color, so if it is your background color, simply hit the X key to flip them. I'm gonna make my brush a little bit larger, and I can now see this area. If you look right down here between her shoe and this background, you can actually see I've still got contamination in my background itself. So look at this. I'm reading 248s, 247s. I've got all of that in here. This has not been cleaned out. We need to hit this again. So before you start to do any of your overlay work, we are going to run levels again, but I'm gonna put a color sampler point down here in the middle of all of this. So again, I'm gonna click on another color sampler. I'm gonna put it down right between, again, it's this area that's right in the whole area that's near her shoe, the fur, and the floor. You're gonna pick the very darkest spot that you can find in there. And again, this is my point number 4 now. I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and say, give me this in RGB readout. You can see I've got 248s in there. Command L. It's just easier to do global stuff like this using levels than it is to go in and try and paint all of this. So again, I'm just going to grab my slider and start to pull it back until I get to 255 or close to 255. Go to my arrow keys and just tap this in. And then before you say okay, you need to check the hair again. The hair is the one thing I'm the most nervous about fucking up. So I'm gonna go back up to the hair and use my preview check mark to turn this on and off. And it does a little damage to part of the hair up here, but I can live with that. It's much better than everything else that's going on down there. So I'm gonna say okay to that. And then again, go back to my brush, the B key, my overlay brush. You can see that whole area has been cleaned out now. And I'm just gonna work this area right around her shoe. And then again, there's still stuff on the floor. This brush is cumulative. You can hit it a second time. You can hit it a third time. You can hit it a fourth time, and a fifth time, and a sixth time, and a seventh and eighth and ninth and 10th line. If that doesn't work, eventually you would go in and use your pen tool right here just to run through there, and then a solid brush on that. I can go to a solid brush really quickly, so I'm just gonna go up to a normal brush and just get rid of that little spot and that little spot. Then back to overlay, and then I can run it down along the side of the fur, and again, hit it a second time, and this brush is cumulative, so you can continue to work that part out. And then all along the bottom of the fur, I'm gonna make my brush a lot bigger because the overlay is protecting it, so you might as well try and get as much out of there as you possibly can. I'm going to zoom back out so I get a more bang for my buck. And then again, where you're still getting shadows on the floor, you want to get rid of those. Hit it repeatedly. That looks pretty good. I'm going to do the other shoe. And again, the area is repeated in there. And once I get this part, then it's relatively simple. You can go back to a normal brush now, zoom back out, and make your brush much larger. And you can just get rid of all this stuff. You can get rid of the whole thing on the side. All of that needs to go. The studio doesn't need to be a part of this. Along the very bottom. Now again, it'd be easier for me to work on the pasteboard because when I use this big brush and I get near the bottom, it turns into a cursor. So I'm gonna hit the F key once, and then I can use my big brush down along the line here. And again, you've already given yourself, you know, enough space down at the bottom with your overlay brush that you can get rid of all of that and that. Zoom back out more. I've got studio on the side and studio on the other side, and that's my knockout. I'll wait for you guys to catch up a little bit.
Question with this, because you had said for the like shoes in the bottom portion that you didn't want it to mess up the hair. Is it not advised to just duplicate the layer and then put a layer mask over the areas that you
Again, at the end of the day, I've got to get the background that is around her hair white.
Well, yeah, my point is like if that's white, but like the bottom of her shoes isn't white, and you're trying to make that white, but then it messes her hair up.
Oh, no, usually, yeah, no, in that area, then I would just use an overlay brush down there.
Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. And typically, I don't do, the only reason I did the overlay brush on the floor here is because of the fur. Typically, it's so much faster just to use the pen tool to do her shoes. I wouldn't bother to wait with this at all. Okay, so now we're going to use this mask. But before we use it, realize that what it's doing now is that this mask, if you were to use it, it would show the background and hide the figure. Remember, the figure is black, so black conceals, white reveals. So I'm just going to invert this, Command-I. So this will now function as a mask, and I can spot actually 2 places where I have missed the background. So just to clean up that part and this part right here. So then I'm going to come over to my image menu, to my layers palette, and I'm going to Command-J to make a duplicate of this. I'm going to click on the background layer because I want to put a solid white color layer in between the two. So I'm going to select the background layer now, the one on the bottom, so that when I add a layer, an adjustment layer, solid color adjustment layer, it puts it right between the two. So I'm going to then click on the icon that's half black and half white and come down, and I'm going to do solid color. And then in solid color, because my foreground and background colors are black and white, you can simply use the eyedropper tool of the color picker to select your white background. It's just faster than typing in the values. And say OK to that. So this is now a white background, a white, full layer that I'm going to put her on. I'm going to come back into my channels palette, hover over the thumbnail. Do not select the knockout layer. Just hover over the thumbnail and hit Command-click to load this as a selection, and then up to the very top layer that you want to knock out and apply it as a layer mask. And then zoom in to take a look at the hair.
I need some help.
Okay.
I have a question. I was accidentally working on a background layer. I didn't have another one. But is this supposed to be out of here?
Yeah, that's studio in the background. Just make it
When I
white.
go over it, it's not.
That's because you got an overlay brush. You need it normal.
A regular one?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's fine. Yep. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I've got spill on her hair, obviously, that I need to fix. So my next move is, again, this is a destructive move. It's going to happen on this pixel content of this top layer, but that's okay because I got a version of it sitting right down at the very bottom. So if this all goes to hell, I'm not sunk. So at any rate, I'm going to hit the B key again to get a brush. This time I'm going to make it a completely soft brush. Change this blending mode from normal down to color, and you'll see I don't get color. Color's not available to me, it's grayed out. And the reason it is that because I've got my layer mask is selected, not my pixel part of that layer. So click on the pixel part to get the little white border around the pixel part, and then you will get color as a blending mode. So come down to color, make my brush a little bit smaller. And then we just need to sample color of hair. The fastest way to sample, you could click on the foreground color picker and then sample her hair and say okay. That just seems very long to me. Instead, if you just hold down your Option key with your brush selected, your brush is a temporary color picker. And you can see, you can actually run it all over the face or her hair until you find a color that you actually like and then say, yeah, that's the color I'm going to pick, is that dark one right there, and just let go. And you actually have that as your spill removal color. And then you can simply just start to remove the spill. So when you get close to her face, you need to make this a completely hard brush. Otherwise, you will actually change the color of her skin to the color of the hair, which you don't want to do. So again, a really hard brush to run along that edge so that you only get the spill that is on. And then as you get down into the color of the boa, you can go across it. And so when I go across it like this, it's the same color as the hair, and that's not really the color it is. It's this more maroonish color. If you take a look further down, so I'm going to hold down my Option key and resample that color, and then simply paint over the wrong color that you had in the beginning. Again, you can change the color over and over and over again, because that's all you're doing is changing the color. So the opacity, the luminosity, we're not changing at all. So I'm going to do that for the boa part of all of this. But again, for the hair part, I'm going to resample the color of her hair and use that for this part. You do want to go back to using a softer brush again now. So again, make it a completely soft brush, because you'll start to pick up the really hard edges of that spill removal. So I'm not going to do the whole thing. This one side is enough for you guys to realize that. I do want to go over the other side and look at her hand that's on the lower corner. So this hand actually has got that green line on it that we have talked about before. We need to choke this image in order to get rid of this, of the green line that goes around this. So again, if you hold down your Option key, the Shift key, and click on your layer mask, you can see it's a darker line that's running here. Again, this is a problem. This is an issue that is because this is a digital file. Whenever you're using digital files, when they are initially processed, they actually look for every edge that's in the image and they run a contrast on that edge. And when that happens, there's an edge along here that is a darker green because of the contrast move that was made on it than is the whole rest of the field. So our zero selective color got rid of the whole rest. It selected the whole rest of the field, but right along the edges of all of this, it is a much, much, much darker green because contrast has been run on that. So that's why this thing actually remains. So hold on your Shift key and click on this again. We've got to get rid of this. To get rid of it, go back over to your History palette, click on the camera at the bottom of your History palette to create a snapshot, and we're going to call this Pre-Choke. I feel like I'm the only person doing this. Are you guys okay?
No.
Where did I lose you?
I am trying to get this as a layer mask, but
No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Throw that layer mask away. Click on the bottom layer. We're going to add an adjustment layer,
Okay.
a solid color adjustment layer, solid color. At the bottom. Yep. Good. It's black right now. You want to actually, you want to just use the color picker and click on your white over here. Click on the just little white patch. Say OK. Hover over, then go underneath this in your channels palette. There's another channel. Your knockout's underneath it.
oh,
No, you don't need to pick it. Just hover over the thumbnail and then hold down your Command key and click. And then come over to your layer and just add as a layer mask.
okay.
You moved it somewhere along the line. This got moved or your layer up here got moved, one or the other. That layer got moved. Break the chain. Oh, hey, don't even do that. Throw that whole thing away, the whole layer away, get rid of everything. Make a new copy of the one that's on the bottom. Drag it onto the top. Good, and then we're going to do this again. Hover over this. Command click. Yeah, no, it's been moved. This has been moved. The channel part has actually been moved. So you would need to hit the V key to get the move tool. And you're going to move this and just, actually here, do this. Hit Command D to deselect. Turn the eyeball of that on. Good. And then you're going to move this until they line up. Go the other way. And come back. And then zoom in really tight on that. You can use your arrow keys to fine tune this. And it's just right and left. And you've also moved it down, so you need to go up. You'll see that you'll get rid of the green line. Go over just a fraction more. Close enough.
Okay.
Now Command click that guy. No, Command the thumbnail. Yeah, and then come back over here to the top one and add it as a layer mask. And then turn the eyeball on the very bottom one down there. Keep going down, there's another one underneath that. Turn the eyeball off. Both eyeballs off. And you're good to go.
What's the color fill layer?
A white background.
Oh.
Okay, so pre-choke is going to be your snapshot of what this image looks like before we choke it. Say OK. Then select your layer mask. And again, to do the choke, we first need to blur it. We need to introduce more levels of middle gray in between these two. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. I'm going to put in 2 pixels. That looks about right for me. And I'm going to say OK to this. And then I'm going to run levels on this. Command L. Grab my black point slider and drag towards the middle and just watch your image. That green line just is disappearing. It is now gone. If you feel like this edge is still a little too soft, and I do feel like mine's a little too soft, grab the white point slider and start to pull it in. You're just running contrast on that edge. It brings back a little bit of my green, so I'm going to push the black point slider a little bit further to the right. And this actually looks really good to me right now. If you use your preview check mark on and off, you can see what you just did. Looks great. Say OK to that. And immediately go to your history palette, click on the little camera icon, and call this snapshot post choke. And say OK. And then you need to undo all of it. If you go back into your history panel, you'll see at the very bottom, you've got levels and a Gaussian blur and then an enable layer mask. You need to go back to the enable layer mask version. It brings back all of that choke part here. I mean, the part that has not been choked. But now if you go all the way up to the very top of your history palette, you do not want to select the post-choke state. You simply want to click on the box to the left. That means you are going to use your history brush to paint with what this image looked like when it was choked. Then select your history brush. It's the one that's right underneath the clone stamp tool. Make sure that it's a normal blending mode. In this case, it doesn't matter what the hardness of your brush is. I usually leave mine at 50%. The reason it doesn't matter is because the history is controlling what happens here. I'm going to zip back out, and then you just paint. And you can be really quick and like this. I'm hitting both sleeves at once just by using a really big brush. But the problem is that when you get near the hair, you want to stay away from that, because look what happens when I hit the hair. So I'm come up here, I'm fine. But look what happens if I actually paint with the choke state in her hair. This happens. I've had people turn this in. That is not acceptable. That's how you get fired from a job. That's how you don't get paid $9.50 an hour to do e-com retouching, because you clearly don't know what you're doing. Don't do that. Command Z. So again, all of this just happens on solid edges. So I can go down, I don't even have to look at it. I can go down on all of these edges right in here. They're all done. I can do her legs. They're done. Again, I'm staying away from the boa. But all of that I know needs to be choked. I don't even have to look at it. That's just how fast it goes. Again, all of that other work you guys are doing, you don't need to do. So that's it.
So I'm at Gaussian blur, and then I do Command L,
Yep.
and then is something
Oh,
else
way too much blur. So go back in history one step. You're screwed here, just because this is, the whole thing is offset here. It also looks like this is actually going to transform. Your scale is off here. During our next break, I'm going to give you this image, and then you can finish it. All right. Okay, questions about any of this? Okay, you can close this up. So, Nikela, are you back into Photoshop now?
Yes.
Did you lose that image?
I lost one of them.
Have you tried opening it again? It didn't open up the saved one? I'm sorry.
2 out of the 3.
You kept 2 out of 3?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, better than none.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys, so that gets us through all of this part. So the next thing that I want to go into is Puppet Warp. How many people in this room have ever used Puppet Warp? And what'd you do with it, Eli?
It's for trade photo. It looks like shit.
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna do the not look like shit version of it. All right. All right. So to get to that, we are going to go to today's class, week number 10. If you go into your student file folders of week number 10, Inside that file folder is a folder called Puppet Warp. If you click on that, that would be great. And then finally, inside of that, there is a Puppet Warp figure. If you can open that up into Photoshop. And it basically looks like this. It's a girl on a white background right now. There is an incomplete mask on this one, so we're going to fix that incomplete mask. But first off, I'm going to turn off the background. So if you come down to the very bottom of your layers palette and click on the eyeball of that background, it will turn it off. And then if you look inside the body group, or a figure group, there's a group that's got all of these layers in it that are controlling this figure. You'll see at the very bottom, there is the green screen part of the image. It's a layer, and there is a layer mask in that. If you click on that layer mask to make it active and then hold down your Option key and click on it again, you'll actually see the knockout, and you can see where the problem is. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a regular brush, make it a normal brush, a completely hard brush, because you don't want to overspray anything. 100% opacity, 100% flow. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger. And then make sure black is your foreground color and simply paint these things, paint these things out. There's also a line, there's an edge line of the frame that's around that you want to get rid of, and then get rid of the other side. And then just click on the image content again. So it's basically a girl that's just floating into space. And this is really important to use when you're using Puppet Warp. I'm going to show you what it looks like if we actually do this image that is not with her isolated, and it doesn't work. So Eli, that may have been your problem. If you had silhouetted the train out, then you might have been able to work with it. But if it's connected to the background, Puppet Warp is worthless. Okay, so does everybody have this? Because if you don't have this, you're not going to be able to do this whole exercise, and this is involved with your homework. This is not your homework. This is not the homework image, but one of the clues that I'm going to give you right now is that Puppet Warp is involved in the image that you're going to do for your homework. So if you're not this far, raise your hand, and I will get you to this point.
Just a question. Did you say remove the 2 pieces from the bottom, right?
Say what?
You only said remove the 2 pieces from the bottom, right?
Yeah, I just got rid of those two weird things that were sitting at the very bottom. I masked them out. Okay.
Does it matter if we're on transparent or white?
You want to turn off the white background at the very bottom. And she should be on transparent, right? Okay. We are going to turn this entire figure, collapse the group. We're going to turn the entire thing into a smart object. You can put groups into smart objects. You can put multiple layers. You can put multiple groups into smart objects. You can put anything in a smart object if it's in the layer palette. So again, I'm just going to click on the figure. I've collapsed it. I'm going to make it active. Up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And you'll see the girl shows up now in the screen on a transparent background looking like with this figure. I want to keep her on this transparent background. It's just easier to see. Yes?
For some reason, my Photoshop recently, it keeps like, the tab thing keeps coming off for me. Like when I come back in, I get my tabs and they erase them. I don't know why it's doing that. Like when I go back into file, into the settings it's fine, but beforehand it's not doing that. Like it keeps doing this again. Like when I log in, it keeps resetting myself back to it.
So,
Like if I go back in, go into like, settings, like actual file.
oh, that it's this tab behavior here.
Yeah, it keeps like just turning little stuff
Yeah,
on and off.
that's okay. So click on settings. You might just have to do a full reset and try, I think it's under workspace. And it's those two. Uncheck that one and the one underneath it both. And say okay and see how it goes. But that won't affect this.
Should I have to go back out? For
No,
this?
no,
It's staying the same as of now.
It's doing, is it working now? No. All right, we'll look at it later. That may be a wholesale reset of your preferences. Okay, so to use Puppet Warp, again, make sure that you got the figure selected. You come up to the Edit menu. It's a transform. And come down to Puppet Warp. And it will open up. And depending on what you have set up in your options bar, it should look like she just got covered in a spider web. Did that work for you guys? If it doesn't work for you, look at the very top in your options panel. There's a place that says show mesh. That you need to put a check mark into that. Now you see this spider web that's on top of her. Okay, so the spider web is critical to how this whole tool works. So this is very different than the liquefy tool. This is a transform tool. But what's going on here is that in Puppet Warp, she's covered in this mesh. So when you make a motion anywhere in Puppet Warping, depending on how you've got it set up, it's going to impact all of your image, every single part of it. So to see what that means, you don't actually need to, well, go ahead and leave it on right now because I want to talk about something else here first really quick. We'll talk about mode later on, but I will tell you right now, if you click on the drop down for mode, you have rigid, normal, and distort 99.99% of the time. You're just going to leave it at normal. The density, though, does matter. If you click on the density, it's a drop-down menu right next to it. It's set to normal right now. If you click on it, you get an option. You can do fewer points. If you go up to the top, you'll see that the mesh gets coarser. If you then come down to more points, you can see it gets much finer. The only difference in this is that the more points, the finer your mesh is, the more points you have like this, the more nuanced your control can be. So you definitely want this. The downside to this is that this is very processor intensive. So if you've got a slow computer and you click on more points, it can get frustratingly slow for you. So again, they give you these options, but the majority of the computers nowadays are more than powerful enough to actually do this using more points. So that's where I'm going to ask you to actually start. If you move in really close to this, you'll also see that this mesh extends beyond her body. That is what this expansion is all about. If you take the expansion down to 0, it will fit exactly along her body, but when you then do the distortion, it will leave part of her body behind, so you don't want to actually do that part. I've never known anybody or any reason to change this beyond that 2-pixel expansion, just so that you understand where we're at. And then finally, I don't like working with the mesh on. You don't need it, you're not looking, you don't have to hit these intersections. You can turn this off and it will work just fine. So then what I'm going to do is I want to actually put a bend in this elbow right here. So to start with this, I'm actually going to show you basically what I meant by the tool working and how the mesh ultimately works. If you imagine roughly where her elbow would bend, I want you to click once right there, and you will see it puts a point in this. Now, this point, the metaphor for this point is a push pin. What is supposedly happened now is that I've actually put a push pin in there, and even though we have a transparent background, imagine she's on an artboard, so on some sort of easel, whatever. This thing has been pinned into place, and unless I move it, now, if I try to move any other part of her, that thing is not going to move. So to see what that means is come over to her wrist on her right hand and click and put another point there. Now you'll notice that the point that we had originally was a white circle with a blue dot in the middle. When we actually clicked and made this second point over here, it now becomes the white circle with the blue dot in the middle, and the original one is now a white circle with a grayed out dot in the middle. This grayed out dot, you can see if you hover your cursor over it, it looks like a push pin. That thing is fixed into place. The one that's actually blue, you can move. Now, you cannot change its position on her body, but when you move it, it will move her entire body. So I want you to click on this and simply drag her body up, and you will see what I mean by the mesh. The mesh, because the mesh is completely encasing her, when we move this thing, it moves all of her. It's moving her head, her feet, her arm. It's moving everything. So, but the area that's been pinned, I'm actually revolving around that point. So that's what I meant by when how this mesh ultimately works. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, to bring it back. So instead, what I want to do is I actually want to bend this elbow. In order to do that, we need to freeze her body, because as you just saw, if I come down here, I'm going to grab her her elbow down, her wrist down here. I'm going to click and pull this part in, and you can see all of her body is still moving. So that's not going to help me. Command Z to undo that. Instead, we need to freeze her body. So I'm going to click and I'm going to put a pin at her shoulder. I'm going to put another one at her shoulder here. I'm going to put one at the bottom of her chin, one in the middle of her forehead, and then I'm going to pin 2 points over on her other shoulder. I'm going to throw another one at her elbow on the other side. I'm going to do 3 of them across the belt at her waist. I'm going to come down to her hem now, and I'm going to do 3 across the bottom of the hem. And then finally, I'm going to put a point right in the middle of her shin, and another one right in the middle of her ankle, and then finally one at her toe. So now I'm pinned down the majority of her body. So now when I click on this to move it, the rest of her body will not move, just this area that's in the center part will. So now I'm going to click on her right elbow, her left wrist. I'm going to click on it, and again, this point becomes blue. I can move it. All of the others are white or ghosted out, so they will not move. And I'm going to simply click and drag this part over until it crosses across her body. Now, when it crosses across her body, when I look at her arm right now, it looks like Gumby arm. This does not look real. I mean, her arm just looks bent. So you can fix that. We are actually going to click and put another point right between the elbow and her wrist, and I'm going to click and push it slightly in. But you see, when I push this slightly in, it's moving her hand, and the reason it's moving her hand is because her hand is not pinned down. If you don't want her hand to move, hit Command Z to go back, Command Option Z to continue to go back. I can't continue to go back. I need to get rid of this point. To get rid of a point, you cannot move a point to another location. If you try to move it, it moves the figure. It doesn't move the point. So if you want to put a point in a different spot, you have to get rid of it and then place a new one in the place that you wanted the new one to be. So if you want to get rid of a point, put your cursor right on it, hold down the Option key, and you'll see when you hold down the Option key, very quickly you will get something looks like a circle with arrows on it, and then it changes to a pair of scissors. When it changes to the scissors, simply click and it gets rid of the point. Now I can actually set a point out on her fingertips, and you'll see the minute I did that, it actually hit her skirt. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm going to just click on the middle of her hand so that I don't hit the wrong thing. And then I'm going to put, again, that point in the middle here, and now I can move this part, and you'll see it'll allow me to square that whole part up, and it becomes more natural. I can also take some of the bend out of her elbow at the top up in here. Can actually push this part in as well. So now it's becoming more the way an elbow would really be bent. However, if you also look at this now, you can see that the hand is actually cut out on top of her skirt. That's only because of the expansion that we're using here in Puppet Warp. If you take a look at the very top in your options bar to the right-hand side, there are 3 little icons. The first of the icons is a sort of a circle that goes counterclockwise, an arrow that goes counterclockwise. If you click on that, what it'll do is it will remove all of these points, but it will keep you into Puppet Warp. You will not exit out of the Puppet Warp workspace, but it'll get rid of all of your points. If you go to the next one over, the circle that's got the slash in it, it will get rid of all of your points and also get you out of Puppet Warp, so nothing will happen. And then finally, if you hit the check mark, it will actually apply your Puppet Warp. So I want everybody to go ahead and click on the check mark. And you'll see when you click on the check mark that this is now, we have moved her hand in, and it's now on top of her skirt. Fucking do that with Liquify. Right now, you people should be just fucking outraged that you can do this. This is fucking miracle shit. And you guys are acting like you are bored to death another day at my job where I'm doing 3 fucking... I used to work in a foundry. Swear to God, I used to work in a foundry, and I made farm equipment, tiller tines specifically. And I used to do 3,200 of those a day, in an 8-hour day, 3,200 of the same fucking motion every single day. And I did it at a press that was a 3,200 pound 32-ton-pound drop press. It was a press that was like 3 or 4 stories tall, and it would come down and like just smash this metal into forming into these shapes. And clearly, you get a hand in there, whatever, your hand's just gone. I mean, there's nothing to save it, right? So this was back in the days when I had just dropped out of college, and my final exams for college, I spent an entire. I shouldn't be telling you this on tape. Hang on one second. A quick detour. All right, back to this. Yes.
So like, this for my project, I can most definitely use, right?
You can what?
Most definitely use this for my project.
Oh, yeah. Wait. We're not done. Okay, so far that's actually really pretty cool that we could actually do this part, right? So if you want to see the difference that we made, again, you can turn off the eyeball for the puppet warp, but when you turn off the eyeball, it basically has to do all the calculations again without the puppet warp, and that takes time. And then when you turn it on again, there's a lag. So the faster way of doing it is just to invert the mask for this. So if you click on the Smart Filter mask and just hit Command-I, it turns it off, and then Command-I brings it back. And you can just see what a radical move that's actually been. However, you could also say, well, you know, Verser, I don't want her hand in front of her skirt. I want it behind her skirt. And I would say, okay, well, then let's do that. So if you double-click on the Puppet Warp Smart Filter, you'll go right back into it. You'll see that all of your points are still there. And then we actually need to get to, I'm going to select this point that's up at the very top, the one that's on the top of her hand. You get into what they call pin depth. So if you take a look at right after it says show mesh, there's a thing that says pin depth, and it looks like a stack of papers. And the stack of papers that's closest to the term pin depth has got an arrow that points up, and then the next one, yes?
Never mind.
How do you get back into puppet
Just
warp?
double click on the word that says puppet warp,
Oh, okay.
and you go right back into it.
Thank you.
Same thing, yeah.
You said double click, and I was like, wait.
Yeah. Anyway, and then click on the point on her hand. So again, if you look at pin depth, the first one says you want to raise the pin depth up to the top of the image. The next one is an arrow pointing down. You want to actually raise it further down. Now, if you remember the order that we put these in, the pins that we put on her skirt happened before the pin that we actually put on her hand. And that is now, so if I want this thing to be behind her skirt, you simply click on it, and then you click on the pin depth icon that has the arrow pointing down. And when you do that, the hand goes right behind her skirt. And then when you click OK to this, she's now actually behind her skirt. I know. This is crazy. Okay, why does this matter? You're not going to actually see this on the video, but you will hear it. So this is like critical for doing believable. Jesus. For doing believable composites. So you've composited me. This is a room. You've shot a picture of this room. You took a picture of me in the photo studio on a green screen. You've cut me out and you dropped me into this room right here. And the first thing you're going to have to do to make this believable is you're going to have to give me some sort of contact shadows, or I'm just going to be floating up off the floor, right? But when you do that, and then you match the color and the saturation and the luminosity and the scale, and you do all of those things, right? It's somewhat believable that I'm actually in this space. But if you really want to bring this home, if you really want to create the illusion that I'm in this space, you take something in this space and you put it on top of me, like this. And this right now, I am more convincing that I'm in this space because I've now something that is in this room is actually on top of me. I'm not just the one thing laying on top of this image. Now I'm layered into this space. Well, this is how you do it. You use Puppet Warp to actually put my hand up here so that I can grab this. You can do Puppet Warp to actually grab this chair. You can do Puppet Warp to put an arm around somebody and make it believable. You can do a Puppet Warp to put a hand in your hair. You can do all of that using this tool. Yes?
So you can take someone's hand all the way down here and bring it up here.
If you take enough time, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we put the hand behind the skirt.
Yeah.
With the puppet warp tool, can you bring the hand from like this to like that to where it's like going backwards into 3D space?
You mean turned around?
Yeah, like turned around but like further backwards, like depth.
So it's like here, you want it further back like that?
Yeah, can you do that with this tool?
Probably not, but there's a new AI function in the new beta version of Photoshop now. It's really scary. No, you can take objects now, because it used to be a joke. We were working with an art director years ago, and we were just shooting. It was we were shooting fashion in the studio, and so it was like clothes, people wearing clothes on some canvas background, right? And the art director said, well, and we're like, so we should turn her around and do the back shot like that. And she goes, well, can't you just turn around in Photoshop? And everybody was just like, how long have you been doing this, right? You can actually do it in Photoshop now. AI will read the figure and generate the back, and you can turn it around. But I'm going to show you the rest of what this can do. The thing is, what you would do in all likelihood is that you would have to scale it. Because again, the thing that gives the illusion that an arm is going further back is, number one, there would be shadow underneath it because of light, right? But also, the further away from your camera, the smaller it gets. So it would be an arm that starts small. It's sort of like the opposite of foreshortening. If I point like this to you, this is really large compared to my head, right? That's what gives it the illusion of being here as opposed to here. So anyway, all right, so let's bring this back. Let's bring it back into the front of her skirt. So I'm going to double click on the puppet warp again, click on that same pin again, and then if you actually go to the pin depth, you can bring it back up in the front of her skirt right now. So you can move things back, you can twist things. If I want to actually twist this, I'm going to twist her other hand here because it only has a single point on it. So again, I'm going to hover over the point that's on her right wrist. I'm going to click on it to make it active. And you remember I said if you hold down your Option key, temporarily you get that circle and then you get the scissors. Do not click, just move your cursor off of this. And when you come right off of it, you will get that circle back again. And now if you click and drag up, you can actually twist her arm. You can twist the joint. Or you can go in the other direction. So we can twist to bring the joint up like that, just to change the angle of her hand in here. I mean, the control in this gets insane. Okay, so what do most people do? How many people in this class? I know that there's a few of you guys who are hardcore fashion. How about the rest of you guys? Any more fashion, some people? Or people who shoot people? All right, so there's enough of you for this. So I will tell you this. Every single fashion photograph you've seen for the last 20 years has been stretched. Every single one of them. They just make people taller. That's just it's a given in the game.
They're so tall, though.
Say what?
I said they're already so tall, though.
Uh-huh. Tell me about it.
First thing you said is command over the point for
No. So if you hover over the point, hold down the Option key, and then you'll get the scissors. If you click the scissors, you get rid of the point. But if you slightly just move your cursor off, then you can let go of the Option key. I'm sorry, you can't let go of the Option key. Come over to the side, then you can actually jump. Right. All right. So anyway.
last one. How important is order all the time when we're placing our points?
How is what?
What's the rank of importance with like the order when we're placing the points?
That part doesn't matter as much. Again, pin depth is the only thing where that will matter. But again, you're either pushing your pins further in or you're pulling them out. That part doesn't matter. So it doesn't. So for instance, if I had done, let's say the hand point first and then the skirt second, it would have been just the opposite. Her hand would have gone behind the skirt to begin with, and then you would have just brought it to the front. So anyway. Okay, so in fashion, what everybody does, two things. They stretch the neck and they make people taller. So again, this goes back to whether you accept that whole philosophy of Greek beauty or not, it's driven 20,000 years of culture, so it's just not 20,000, 2,000 years of culture, it's just where we're at. So I'm just going to show you the way you would really do it. The way it used to be when we would actually stretch bodies is that it's very simple to stretch a body. You can simply go in and use the scale tool, and instead of keeping it the ratio, you just make the body taller. But when you do that, everything gets stretched. So faces get stretched, and you end up with people who look more like they have a horse face than people who look normal, like her, right? You stretch the face when you stretch the whole rest of the body. That's why it's not. So the way we used to have to do it is that you would make 2 layers. You would have, you would take one and you would stretch the body, and then you would take the head off the other one that was not stretched, and you would paste that onto the body that had been stretched, and then you would have to work out where the stretched part actually joined the unstretched part, and it was a lot of work. It's just easier to do it in Puppet Warp now, because in Puppet Warp you can do the real thing. So to do this, we're first going to make her neck longer. So zoom into her face. So to do this, it takes more effort than you might think, but it works really well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I actually need to pin the area on the lower part of her neck. So I'm going to throw a pin right down into her necklace, and I'm going to work my way across, and I'm doing like just 4 or 5 pins in there to actually just anchor the whole bottom area of her neck. And then you need to pin her head. But the thing about her head is that right now, watch what happens. So I've only got 2 pins in here, and you would say, well, Versa, you've got enough pins in there to, just watch what happens. I'm going to click on this bottom one and move it. I'm going to click and drag up, and you can see the forehead is pinned, but the part that I'm moving now is not. So Command Z to undo that. Instead, I'm going to put points all the way around the perimeter of her face. Now you'll see, and everybody look at my screen really quickly just so that you see this one. Even with more points on, this is telling me I am trying to put a pinpoint down that is too close to one that already exists. This problem gets significantly worse the fewer points that you have. So if you were doing normal, your points have to be even further apart. And if you're doing fewer points, they need to be even further apart. But in my case, I'm going to say okay to that. It's not that much further off, so I'm just going to put another point down. So I want you to go ahead and run this up. You need to actually pin her ears. You need to pin her hair.
Does it matter if the pins are on the side of her face, or do they just need to be relatively close?
They need to be relatively close. But like the little curl that's shooting out, you need to pin that. Because what I need is that everything has to move. So I've got pins all the way around her face, but now you want to also pin really important details. So I'm going to put a pin at the bottom of her lip, and again, I get that warning, so I can't put it at the bottom of her lip. I'm going to put it in the middle of her mouth. I can get one there. I can do one at, I'm trying to get near the corner of her mouth, so I'm going to try, I'll get out farther. Let's say okay. And I'll give up on that. I'm going to put one in the middle of her nose. I'm going to put one in the middle of each eye, and then I'm going to go across her forehead. And I'm hoping that that's enough pins. All right, so now I need to select all of them, and this is for me one of the worst things about the Puppet Warp tool, is you have to select each individual one. There's no way that you can select like a marquee tool and drag across all the ones that are on her head and have them selected all. You need to hold down the Shift key and select every single pin that's on this girl's face. So and you'll see they all will turn blue, so we're selecting all of them.
Not the neck.
Not the neck. You want the lower part of her neck to stay frozen. You want her head now. Her head is going to be frozen as well because we are selecting all of these pins and they are moving as one. What were you saying, Kelly?
I figured it out.
Okay.
You say including the hair too, right, Versa?
The hair, everything. Because otherwise, if you don't select the hair and we go to move her face, the hair is frozen and you will crush the hair and her face will actually do that same distortion that I just showed you before. So in my case, I've got all of these. Nope, I got the one in the middle of her forehead is not selected. And again, all of that will distort. So now I've got all of the ones that are on her face are selected. Everything that is on her body is frozen. So it does not matter which of these pins you select. Just click on one of them and drag straight up, and you will see that you can stretch her neck. Now, don't go too wild with this. These are very subtle movements. A little bit of motion, a little movement here goes a really, really, really long way. But we have now just elongated her neck. We're not done. So come down. We now need to make her taller as well. So in making her taller, we need to do this in two different parts. So the first part is that you don't want to just drag everything and make it longer. What I want to do is I want to make her thighs longer, and then I want to make her shins longer. So to make her thighs longer, I'm going to now just select the pins that are at the bottom of the hem of her skirt.
Are we deselecting the face?
Yeah, don't worry, the very minute you select the first pin on her skirt, the face is deselected. So again, but you have to hold down the shift key. Don't hold down the shift key to begin with, because if you don't select one of the points on her hem first, all the points on her head will still be selected. You don't want that. And then again, hold down your shift key once you've selected the first points down at the bottom. And so all of these are now selected. However, if I now actually take a pin on the hem of her skirt and drag it down, you'll see it crushes her shins. It makes her, because her shins did not move with it. Command Z to undo that. Hold down your shift key. You need to select the pins that are on her shins and her feet as well. Now you've got all of the ones that are below her thighs. So now you can click and pull this slightly down. And again, a little goes a long way. Do not, the 1/4 of an inch that we're doing here translates into 2 inches in a real person. So just be subtle about this stuff. Then I want to go ahead and make her legs longer as well in the area from the hem of her skirt. I want to make her the bottom part of her legs, her shins, longer. So I'm going to simply click on a hand pin up at the top to deselect everybody else. And then all I'm going to select is the points that are actually on her leg. Now, the one that's in the middle of her leg right here is going to cause me a problem. So I'm simply going to get rid of it. Hover over it, hold down your Option key, click on the little scissors to get rid of it. And then I'm actually going to add another pinpoint right at the bottom of her heel. So I've got 3 points that are on her shoes. So I'm holding down the shift key and selecting the other 2, because I don't want to change the angle of her. She's actually up on her toes. I don't want to change that angle. So that's why I've pinned both the toes and the heels. And then simply click and drag this down slightly longer. And then hit the check mark and say, okay.
You said, how many, with the smaller motions, like 1/2 inch?
No, there's no way to really know that part. But what you will see is this. So go ahead and say okay to this. And then again, invert the smart filter mask to just see what you've actually done. And you can see it's enormous.
Did you just invert it?
Yeah. Now, if you really like what you've done to her body, but you don't like the hand that's coming over like that, you've got a mask on this for the smart filter. You can hit the B key to get a brush, and working on your layer mask, make sure you got the brackets around the layer mask. Make sure that your brush is black, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. You can paint across her arm and actually restore it to the one that's there. Again, you've got masks in smart filters. So the ability to actually adjust this stuff, again, is just, it's absolutely remarkable what you can ultimately do with it. Questions about this? Okay, great time for another break. I've got 3:50. Let's make it I've got actually 3:49. Let's be back at 4 o'clock, guys. Okay. So just to give you some idea, quick idea of what's going on, this was, so I was in my house, and I was looking at these pictures. There was a really famous photographer who was doing stuff for Harper's Bazaar, and she had these really cyanic blue skies that were shot against these just pure white buildings, very Santa Fe-like. But again, the color of the sky was this, well, it was this color actually. Now that's a lot more sky color on this screen, but if you take a look at it on yours, you'll see that the sky's got a lot more green and cyanic in it. It's not a normal sky, but anyway, so that's what I was going for here. And I wanted to do these white buildings. So I had this very Santa Fe kind of vibe going on in my mind, right? And so what I did, if you take a look at your layers palette, skip the bottom layer. I mean, the layer number 1, there's a gradient in that. We'll get back to that in a second. But turn on the next layer that's actually on the top. And what I did was, I literally just built a model out of foam core. And the model out of foam core was about the size of this. It was about the size of this. I mean, it was literally, 8.5 by 11 pieces of foam core that I've glued together or taped together to build this shape. And I took it on the very top. We lived on the very top of this building. I took it up on top of my roof. It was a bright sunny day, and I shot at available light. And that's what you can see right here. You can actually see the plants that were in the background of the top of my roof. If you zoom in on this image really closely, you'll also, you can actually see the cut edge of the foam core. So this thing is tiny, right? And I just shot this. Now, the next layer, if you actually go to the same layer, is the layer mask that is on here. It's turned off right now. If you hold on your shift key and click on the red X, it will turn it out and you can see. Then I added that blue sky to the background, but I still had an issue with the edge of the foam core. So if you turn on the next layer that's up above that, it actually gets rid of that. So this was going to be my set. However, skies have gradients in them. Even in the sunniest of days, they actually have a shift between the horizon and then the area of the sky that's right above you. And that, if you click on the layer of the gradient, that will actually introduce that gradient to this. So that's what this whole thing was about. So I built this thing, and then I was going to be like, okay, I'm going to put these figures into it. So to put the figure into it, if you simply click on the eyeball for the body, you'll actually see there's a figure that's now been put in here. So I want to create the shadow for this person because, again, if you take a look on the lower right-hand corner of this, there's a real shadow in here. This is a real legitimate shadow that's coming from the model itself. I need to actually match that, and you can see this is a relatively sharp shadow, but this is also a compound shadow because if you zoom into the area that's down by her feet, you can see that there's an area of floor that then hits this back wall, and that's exactly what I was just showing you guys over here. This is a compound shadow that we need to recreate. Does that make sense, everybody? So, starting from the beginning, looking at this, do you guys see any problem with starting where we're at right now? You should know me well enough to know by now that there's clearly is some problem. You just got to figure out what it is. I have conflicting lighting. Conflicting lighting. We don't have time for me to keep guessing or to keep dragging this out, right? If you take a look at the light that's coming onto the background, the light has got to be coming from the right. How do I know that? Again, I've got a shadow there, right? If that shadow existed, but my light was coming from the left, the object that is creating that shadow would have to be in my image. I would have to be able to see it. They don't just happen out of nowhere, right? So it's got to be coming from the right to the left. Now, most people then struggle when they're looking at figures. Everybody looks at faces. That is not the thing to look at when you're trying to figure out lighting direction. Instead, I want you to zoom into her legs. Can you see the highlight and shadow side of her legs? It's simple as can be. You don't need to, again, in this case, the lighting is on the left going to the right. So they are conflicting lighting. The lighting direction on my background is right to left. The lighting on the girl is left to right. I need to fix that. I've either got to flip the girl or I've got to flip the background. In my case, I'm going to flip the girl. So if you select the entire body group, come up to the image menu, the edit menu, down to transform, down to flip horizontal. It'll throw her the other way, and in this case now, she's actually facing in the correct direction, lighting-wise. Now, I know there are other issues with this. She's far too contrasty for this image. I know all of that, but I want to tackle the shadows part first, and then we'll actually deal with the composite issues to balance her in here better after that. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so to do this, I I first off I'm going to make a smart object out of the whole body because I want to be able to just make a selection of just of her body. So I'm going to just select the body group at the very top. I've collapsed it, although you don't have to collapse it to do this. Just make sure that you've selected the group. Come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert this to smart object. And you'll see it just looks like her on the background, which is fine. I'm also going to put my entire background into one group. So I'm going to click, just to do a little layer organization here. I'm going to click on the very top layer of my background, come down to the bottom, hold down the shift key and click to select all of them. So I've selected all the layers that represent my background. And then I'm going to come over to the menu item to the right of my tab, of my layer tab, click on it and say, I want to do a new group from layers, not just a new group. If you do a new group from layers, it'll create a new group. It'll allow you to name it and it'll put all of those layers into it. So it's just faster. So, and I'm going to call it background. And say OK. Okay, so to build shadows, again, we've talked about this before. Shadows always go on top of your background, but underneath your figure. If you put your shadows on top of your figure, then you have to mask them out so that they don't lay on top of your figure. But it's simply easier to put them underneath so that the figure actually sits on top of them. Then there's no masking involved with it. It's just more efficient. So I'm going to add, Jesus Christ, somebody is hell-bent and determined. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to click and I'm going to add just a blank layer and I'm going to double click on it. So just added a blank layer above my background and I'm going to call it shadow. And we're going to do two of these. I'm going to call this shadow floor. And then I am going to actually create the shadow, and then I'll create the one for the shadow for the wall in the background. So again, to start with this, I'm going to hover over the my smart object of the figure. I'm going to hold down my command key and click, and it will just load her as a selection. Again, she is on a transparent background, so I've just loaded her as a selection. I'm working on my shadow floor layer, and I'm just going to fill this with black. Now, my foreground and background colors are not defaulted. I've got a brown, it's a hair color in my foreground, so I'm going to hit the D key to get them to foreground, to be black as my foreground color. And again, just to fill that in on this shadow floor with black. So Option Delete will actually fill it. Command D to deselect. Say what? Just hover over the thumbnail of the body, hold down Command click. So then if you turn this off, you can see you've just got a black figure of this. It's just filled. So this is what I'm going to base my shadow on. So then I'm going to make a duplicate of this shadow floor, Command J. And then I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it shadow wall, because it's the wall. It's going to be on the wall behind her, just so I know the difference in these two. And so this is how I'm going to start. So I'm going to click on the eyeball to make the body visible, and then I'm going to click on the shadow wall, and I'm just going to move it into place. Now again, if you remember my little demonstration over there, it doesn't turn at an angle. It gets a little bit wider, but it does not turn at an angle. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm just going to drag it and put it over here on the wall. And then what I'm going to do is I'm trying to look at this in the sense of how does the light hit her, where does that land on the background? And you can see, you can sort of juggle it around, but I'm really looking at this. I try to get back from it and just say, you know, how does it look like this ultimately the direction of this would be? And so in my case, this is close enough. Again, you can work with these things day in and day out, whatever. You can tweak them, but for the most part, this will actually give me enough to work with. I'm going to zoom into this area right here. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. I really don't want to wrestle with her knees and all of this, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit like that. And then you remember, I said that in this case, the shadow, as it goes back, becomes slightly wider. So we are going to make this, it distorts. So we're going to make this slightly wider. Hit Command T to bring up the levels dialog box. And then remember, I'm going to drag it just so it gets a little bit wider. But if you only drag one handle, it only gets wider from one side. The other side doesn't distort as well. I need them both to distort. So you hold down the Option key, and then when you click on this and you pull, both of them slightly move out. And you don't need to kick it out a ton. It doesn't get that much bigger as it goes away, but it does get slightly bigger. So again, this is what I'm going to do for my background for the shadow that's on my wall. And I'm going to hit the check mark to say okay to that. Then I've already built in masks for you. So if you scroll to the bottom of your channels palette, there's a channel in there called back wall. Hover over the thumbnail, do not select it. Hover over the thumbnail, Command click. That will load it as a selection, and then simply add it as a layer mask on your wall. And it should look like this. So does everybody have a shadow that's just on the back wall? Not on the floor.
What did you do? in the channels?
You're good. So just Command click on this. Don't select it. Hover over the. Just hover over. You don't ever have to select this. That's okay. Hover over that. Command click.
Okay.
Good. It loads as a selection. Come over to your shadow wall and click on it. And you're just gonna add this as a layer mask. It just gets rid of the shadow that's on the floor.
First, can you just say it one more time, please?
Where did I lose you?
You lost me. I have it selected when you came over to the other side for the.
To get rid of the floor? Yeah, so all you need to do, so does yours look something, sorry, something like this? Okay, just come over to the channels palette. At the very bottom, there's a thing called black wall. Do not select the channel, just hover over the thumbnail, hit Command click, and it'll load it as a selection, and then back over to your layers palette and add it as a layer mask. And it should get rid of the legs on the floor.
So should I pull it down more than?
I don't know. It should be lower. Because again, the sun is coming from the top. The sun is high here. It should be lower. If it's even with the girl or the girl's going over the top of the wall, that's not right. Again, the light is higher coming down. The shadow would be lower. Okay. So then the next thing that we have to do is we actually need to do the floor part. So I'm going to click on the floor shadow. We're going to transform this. But in order to do this, we've got to really distort this one. I want to go to the pasteboard here because when we distort stuff, the control handles go outside of your image and you can't get to them unless you're on the pasteboard. So hit the F key once and now we're on the pasteboard. And then I'm going to actually transform the floor shadow. However, right now I want to be able to see how it lines up with the shadow that's on the background. So I'm going to create the mask for the floor shadow first. To do that, we're going to do the same thing. Hover over the back wall, Command click to load that as a selection. Now, if I use that as the layer mask for the floor shadow, it'll do the same thing. It'll just be on the back wall. That's not what I want to do. I want it to be on the floor. I want to keep it off of the black wall. So I need to invert this selection. So up to the select menu, down to inverse, and then simply add that as a layer mask onto the floor shadow part. And you'll see that the background, the wall, that triangle on the wall that was white on the wall, letting it show on the wall, is now black. It's keeping it off the wall, but you will see it on the floor, which is exactly what I want. But now we need to break the chain link between the shadow itself and this mask, because we need to move the shadow in space, but we don't want to move the layer mask. So click on that link in between the two to break it. Are we good? All right, and then we're going to transform this. Command T. No, I'm sorry. Wait. Make sure that you're on the shadow, the pigment, the pixel part of the shadow, not the mask. We don't want to do anything to the mask. It's exactly where it needs to be. But I'm going to click on the pixel part. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, and now you'll see if you rotate this, it actually rotates around the anchor point that's right close to her crotch. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. We don't want that to happen. We want to angle this. We want to keep the shadow pinned at her feet. So you're going to grab that anchor point and drag it down to put it right between her feet down at the very bottom. You're going to drop it right down here so that when I rotate it now, it keeps the shadow part at her feet, and then the other part of her body will flop over. So then I'm going to zip back out and then just rotate this. And I'm going to bring it down, and you can see what I mean about it's now letting the legs show up down at the bottom. So I'm going to bring this down like this. I'm also going to stretch this out slightly. So I'm just going to grab the top to stretch it out slightly. And then I need to bring this together so that these legs actually line up with the shadow that's on the background wall. So I'm going to do the same trick again. This is now the side. Look at the anchor point, not the anchor point, but the control handle that I'm going to is this one right here. I'm going to hold down my option key and click, and I'm going to bring these together. And you'll see that it'll actually start to bring the shadow elements closer to one another. Then I'm going to rotate it a little bit more, and I'm going to bring them together a little bit more. Ooh, how did that happen? Oh, my anchor point moved. So again, if you're holding down your option key and you're too close to your anchor point, it jumps. And mine actually jumped up to the side of my image right here. So I'm going to bring it back to where it was to begin with, right down there below her feet. And then again, go back to my option key and click and pull this in a little bit more and rotate this over a little bit more and bring it in even a little bit tighter and roll it over a little bit more. And that was a little too much. So I'm just going to open up the one side of it here. And you'll see, we're going to get pretty close in here. It's not going to be exact in here, and I'm fine with that. Right now, in my case, I've got one side that's actually touching. That's actually lining up pretty well. The other side that's too long. And then this other side is actually also lining up pretty well. And the other side is slightly too long. I'm going to rotate it just a fraction more. So I'm pretty close to this. Before you do anything else, you'll see that this is now off on her feet. So on her feet, I need to actually bring this entire thing down because this needs to be coming off of her toes. And that actually throws my shadows off at the top. So I'm going to angle them up so that it's closer like that. And then again, this one shadow side is a little off, so I'm going to pull it out a little bit more. Again, I'm just trying to get these points to actually line up. And then I'm going to check my feet again. And the feet on this are actually fine. That part's actually pretty good in here. So in my case, I'm close enough on this, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So I'm going to commit my transform. That part's fine. So I've got the beginnings of my shadow, my compound shadow to make right now, but I've still got work to do on this. So if you zoom in and take a look at this, you'll see that the legs don't line up. There's a part of where this leg is too big. There's another part over here on the other side where that leg is also too big. I need to fix this. You'll also notice that there's a little white line that goes in between the wall shadow and the floor shadow. That's a consequence of the fact that when you make a selection, when you get the little marching ants, those marching ants are actually a pixel wide. And so when you do an inversion like this, the width of that one pixel line does not get filled. It stays white. So we need to fix all of that. To do that, I want you to turn off the body. So the body image that's at the very top, I don't want to see that. I also want you to turn off the background group. So the only thing that I have visible now are the two shadows. I've got the wall shadow and I've got the floor shadow, and it's all on a transparent background. I'm going to select the top shadow, the wall shadow, and I'm going to combine these into one. To do that, we do a merge stamp version of the visible imagery. So Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. Again, Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E does a combination. It does a merge stamp version of everything that is visible. Because I turned off the body and I turned off the background before I did this, I have now got a merged version of this that is on a transparent background, which is what I want. I'm going to then turn off the two layers that actually made this. So my two original shadows, I'm turning them off. And I'm going to double click on this merge stamp version, and I'm going to rename it Shadow Complete.
What did you have highlighted?
Just not highlighted, doesn't matter, the top layer. So, turn the body's off, no, the top layer of your shadow. But you also need to turn off your background. All right, so then hold down Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. That is now your complete shadow. Turn off the other two. Go ahead and rename that complete shadow. And then turn everybody else. You can turn the other stuff back on. You can turn the body back on, and you can turn the background back on. Okay, so we need to fix this. If we zoom into where those two shadows are actually meeting, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually get rid of the white line. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that you are working on your complete shadow layer. Make sure that your brush is completely hard. 100% normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then small. Black is my foreground color, and I'm just going to paint right through that line just to close it up. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. But now I need to get rid of these overhangs. And so to get rid of the overhang, I'm going to use the pen tool. So the P key to get the pen tool. I'm going to click on right where those two come together. I'm going to simply click there, and then I'm going to come way out here and just put a small amount. I'm going to come even all down here further. A small amount of bend into this, and then I'm going to just zip around and reconnect. Go to my path palette, double click on this working path and call it left leg. And say OK. Command click to load that as a selection. If I just get rid of that black part now, it'll be too sharp. So I'm coming up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and put in a 0.5 pixel. Guys, we've done this 1,000 times. Go back to my layers palette, and on this, on my shadow complete, I just want to get rid of that. Hit the delete key. Command D to deselect. We're done. I need to do the same thing on the other leg. Pen tool, click, come way out, pull it out, come back around, put just a small bend into it, go to my path palette, double click, call it right leg, say OK, command click to load it as a selection, soften the selection by modifying it, by feathering it, 0.5 pixel, OK, back on my shadow complete, and just delete. So this is now the beginning of my compound shadow part in here. However, there's a lot of things that are not correct with this yet that we're going to fix right now. So the first thing that we're going to fix is that we talked about how the shadow, it starts sharp by her feet, but it actually gets softer as we get to the wall. We need to do that for this. But first off, I've got to turn this into a smart object so that I can use a smart filter mask to control the gradient of my sharpness to my softness. So to do that, I'm going to turn this shadow complete into a smart object. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, to convert to smart object. And then when I do blurs for shadows, I typically use the motion blur. I don't use the Gaussian blur for this. I think motion blur looks more believable. So to come up to use that, come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to motion blur. And if you really crank the distance up on your motion blur, you'll see what happens. And actually, the angle that you've got on this little wheel determines the direction of the motion. So when the angle goes from like 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, the motion goes from left to right. If you change the motion to go from like noon to 6 o'clock, then the motion actually follows that. Or if you do a side angle in between, if you do 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it goes in that direction. I always think that it coming across the body works the best, so I'm going to go back to that 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. However, this shadow, I've got a distance, a pixel of 240. It's huge, and that's nowhere near needs to be nowhere near that big. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this image, and what I'm looking at is the edge of the real shadow and the edge of the one that I'm making, and I need to get those two to match. So again, at 36 pixels, it's still way too soft. So I'm cranking down here. I'm going to continue down. When I get down to like an 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, that's looking like the edge in here is about the same as the edge right in here. So that's where I'm going to actually have the amount of blur on my image. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Now that I've actually got this done, I can actually take a look at it. I'm going to zoom in this part, and you can see I've got motion that's happening on the background wall. The shadow that's down on the floor is a little bit sharper, but it's not as sharp as I would actually like. And again, I want the gradient, more of a gradient in here to do this. So to do that, I'm actually going to use a gradient on this motion, on my motion blur. So select the layer mask, not the layer mask, the smart filter mask. Hit the G key to get a gradient. In the gradient, the type that you want, in your drop-down menu, you want to use a classic gradient, not a regular one. You also want to, in the drop-down menu here for the type of gradient, you want to click on that. Make sure in your drop-down menu, you open up the basics gradient, and you select the very first one, which is the foreground to background color, black to white, and say okay. And then finally, up in the top of the 5 types of gradients that you can use, you want to pick a linear gradient. And so when you click on the linear gradient, what I'm going to do is I'm working on this layer mask. I'm simply going to click, again, black is my foreground color. So if I start with black, it's going to hide the blur right here near her feet. And then as I move to the back, it's going to allow the blur to increase. So I'm simply going to click and drag across like this and let go. And you can see it's sharpened up the shadow right here next to her feet. But as you start to move here to the background in the back, it continues to then get softer and softer and softer. Does that make sense, what we just did? I realize I'm doing this on my own right now, so just follow the steps and we'll get through this.
What did you do to put the, like, how did you move it across the screen to put the gradient on?
So all I did was, I've got my blur right now here. If you turn the blur off, you can see the shoes sharpen up, we get more shadow in here, we get to see the detail of all of that, but my whole image sharpens up. If I turn the motion blur back on, everything is blurred. But if I put the smart filter mask, that controls where the blur happens and where it doesn't. So that's when I grab the gradient tool and I'm simply clicking at her feet and dragging in this direction. And when I let go, you can see the gradient part where it's black here. I'll show you the gradient itself. I'm going to load it as a selection. You can see where that line is. This line is where this black edge, so the transition, all of this right here is black on this mask, so there is no blur on this. All of this is still white, so all of the blur still remains on this background. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then finally, what a lot of people will do with shadows is simply drop the opacity. They'll do this. They'll start to drop the opacity down and they'll say, okay, well, that's my shadow. The problem with this is that's not how shadows work. The way shadows truly work in the real world is that shadows eliminate the highlights in your image and they leave the shadows. We need to emulate that. Not only that, this only makes shadows, this shadow is a perfectly neutral gray. Shadows all have color in them. I need to do both. So to do both, I am actually going to drag the opacity back up again. I'm going to now convert this smart object that's got this smart filter into another smart object. And the reason I'm doing that is that I want to use this to make a selection. I want to use this shadow to make a selection mask. But the problem is that if I just command click and load this, my shadow right now, so I command click and load this, this does not have the smart filter on it. This is just loaded what's in that what's in that layer. It doesn't load the effect of the shadow of the motion blur that I've put on here. In order to bring those two together, you create another smart object out of this. So Command D to deselect, just select the shadow complete, and we are going to convert that into another smart object. This is now a nested smart object. But now this thing that I'm going to load right here, if you take a look at it, it's got the blur in it. This has now got all of the blur in it. This sharp part is still sharp right here. So the layer mask, because my motion blur is now nested inside this smart object, it is now affecting this. So now when I load this as a selection, it will have that gradient blur in it. So I'm going to just hold down my command key, click to load this as a selection, and then finally I'm going to add this as a curve. So all of this work to get this far, I'm going to turn off this regular shadow part right here. This now allows me to control and make shadows the way shadows truly work. So to see what I'm talking about right now, I'm on this curve. The layer, the layer mask is already on here. It's been built with all of that shadow effort. I'm going to grab the white point slider, my highlight, and I'm going to start to drag this down. This is how shadows truly are made. Again, I am robbing the highlights out of this, but the shadow part remains in here. The shadow part, the light remains in here. I am not pulling the exposure down on this. I am stripping out the highlights of this. So I now need to match it to the shadow that already exists in here. To do that, I'm going to click on my targeting, on the color sampler tool. I'm going to do a clear all to get rid of the, there were already samples that were down there. I'm going to click on the shadow area that's right here in the middle, and then I'm going to click on the real one that's over here on the side. I need to get these two numbers to actually match on this. So you can see my shadow number 1, I'm going to crank it all the way back up again just so that you can see. My shadow number 1 is at 243s, whatever, because I didn't get all the way back up. It doesn't matter. But they need to be in these 150 areas right here in order to match the real color and tone of the real one that's in here. So I'm just going to grab this, my composite RGB one, because it'll change everybody for me. It's just quicker. And I'm going to drag it down. The 159 in the red channel is the highest level. So I'm just going to bring this down so everybody is 159. So you can see these are all 159. Now I need to colorize my shadow. The green channel of the real shadow has got a green of 153. So I'm going to go to my green channel and simply drag it down till I get a 153. And then my blue channel right here is a 150 in the real one. So I'm going to do the same thing and pull this down to make it a 150. So now my fake shadow is matching exactly what a real one is. And look at this. However, you're still being fooled by this because you're thinking, well, this still doesn't look fucking real here. I mean, look at the girl, whatever. We now actually need to do our check layers for the girl to make this finish, to make this work. And we've got 10 minutes to do it in, and I bet you I can do it in 10 minutes. So even if you haven't built the shadow, you can do the check layer part with me. So everybody do this with me. Go to the very top, select the body image that's on the top. I'm going to do Command H just to hide those little points because I don't like them. Select the top because remember, all of our check layers and all our adjustment layers go on top of the body so that we can clip it down to the body. I'm going to go to my Actions palette. I'm going to find my check layers action. Remember, do not open it up and select part of the action itself. You want to select the parent and then just click on the arrow that runs to the right. And you'll see you get this nuclear image. That's okay. I'm not going to start with color, so I'm going to turn off my color check layers. And I'm going to come down. I'm going to start with luminosity. And I'm going to click on this. And you can see now looking at this image, the thing that's absolutely staring me in the face, I think the light on her face is actually pretty good, but her dress is just way too black. Imagine this scene. It is broad daylight. You are in a space that is surrounded by white. It is a white floor, white walls. This sun is beating down. There is no way that dress would be that dark. Not possible. So you need to think like that. So again, I'm going to, in order to lift those shadows, you do not use curves to do that. We are going to use the shadow highlight adjustment filter. So select the body. Again, this body is a smart object, so we can use smart filters on this. So if you need to adjust them, you can go back and forth. It works perfect for this. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to shadows and highlights. And by default, it kicks this in at, it opens up the shadows with a 35%. Now, when I look at this, I think this is kind of close. I think it may be a little bit overdone. So I'm just going to drop my shadows down the amount of correction. I'm going to try it at a 30%. That feels better. I'm going to try it at a 25%. That feels still pretty good in there. I'm going to try 20%. That's feeling too dark in there, I think. I'm going to go back to 25%. Again, it doesn't matter. It's a smart filter. We can go in and change it. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that, and then I'm going to turn off my luminosity check layer. And this seems like a much more believable version of this. I'm going to invert my smart filter and look at the difference. Again, this would be impossible surrounded by that amount of white. This, not so much. So again, you could look at this and say, if you're zooming in on this, you could say, well, Versa, it still looks a little too blown out. That's looking more gray right now. So I'm going to double click on my shadows and highlights again. It opens it up, and I'll just drop it down to 20% and see if I like that better, and say OK to that. And that feels right. So again, things that are still throwing me off is the coloring in all of this is still not actually where it should be, nor is the saturation of this where it should be. So again, this is an iterative process that we're going to go through when you do this. So my next move on this is to change the color, or to adjust the color. So I'm going to click on the color, and so I've turned on the color part right here, and I've turned them on. And I'm now looking at this. Now, when I think about a scene like this, I think of, okay, it's sunlight, it's coming down late in the day, it's warm. This light is way too cold on my background. Now, I don't want to touch the sky. Skies are blue. I'm going to leave that as blue. But I think I'm not going to make the girl bluer. That would not fit my scene. It's a sunny day. The sun is setting. It's not setting, but the sun is down at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's beginning to warm up. It's not getting bluer. It's getting warmer. So the mismatch here is not the girl. The mismatch is the background. The background needs to warm up. So to do that, I'm going to go down to my background layer at the very bottom. Where are you? Down. I'm going to click on my background layer to make it active. Again, it's the group that it's at the very bottom. And I'm going to add a curve on top of that to adjust the color balance. So again, click on the adjustment layer. Come and you're going to do color balance. Where are you? There you are. And then in color balance, all I need to do is set this color balance blending mode to color. I don't need to clip anything because it's controlling the entirety of the background underneath it. There's no reason I need to clip this. So it's now, again, if I look at my background's got a lot of blue in it. I need it to be warmer. If you look at the blue-yellow slider, simply click on it and start to push it over. Don't go too hard at this at the very beginning because I've got another adjustment that I need to make. There's a lot of orange that is in her as well. I'm only pumping in yellow now. In order to add orange to that, I need to add some red. So I'm going to grab the red cyan slider up at the top and push it slightly over to bring in a little bit more red in that. And then I'm going to turn my color check layers off and look at the difference in what we've got now. This is now the color balance that I actually have added to the back. It now fits her in this scene. And then my final adjustment layer is going to be my saturation check. And when you click on the saturation check, the background you can ignore in terms of the sky. There's no real matching of this. I mean, I can match the sky a little bit, but the background has got no saturation in it because it's a pure white or close to a pure, it's very light gray. So, but sure, her saturation on her skin really stands out in this image. I've got to drop that down some. So I'm going to click on the body again because I need to put my adjustment layer right above it so that I can clip my saturation to the body. So I'm going to select the body, click on say I want to add a hue saturation layer to this, change the blending mode of this hue saturation layer to only change saturation. So the blending mode is saturation. And then clip this to the body. Hover between the two layers, hold down your Option key and click to clip it, and then simply drop the saturation back. And you'll see it only changes her forehead and the skin of her hands. So I'm going to pull that back a little bit like that. It seems to fit the scene, the saturation of my blue sky slightly better. I'm going to uncheck my saturation check layer, and this is where I am.
Question, when I tried going to my luminosity checker, the whole thing just turned gray. Even on color mode.
Well, it should be grayscale.
No, it's like totally gray though. I don't know what I did wrong.
Well, so first you have to turn your color adjustment layer off. Can't have multiple ones on. It's two of them. They work in tandem, so it's like the whole group off. Yeah, that's fine. You're good. Right, and now click on your luminosity check layer. There you go. So it looks a little bit sketchy on this screen, but if you guys come over here and take a look at this, this looks fucking killer. Come over really quick.
That does look good. Yeah, that is way better actually.
Here, I'm going to do a before and after really quickly. Check this one out. Snapshot that. Turn off all of my adjustments. My shadows. And my color background. And snap that. All right, guys, so here. This is where I started, and that's where I ended up.
It's like you went from like
I'm telling you guys, if you do this, follow the plan, your shit will just like,
Having
Alright.
plans are good, following them.
yeah.
it looks like you did climb.
Anyway, so that's it. So the last thing I'm going to tell you really quickly, and we've got 1 minute to do it, and this will matter, because this is your assignment. So in your assignment folder for this week, this is the final assignment that you're doing other than your final project. In the final assignment, in your assignment folder, there is a group of images. There's a capture session that's in here. Inside of this, there are 5 raw files. There is a reason there are multiple raw files in here. That's your clue number 1. Write this down. Clue number 1 to successfully satisfying this assignment is there is more than 1 raw file in here. The second thing is this is the file. I'll show you what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Your assignment is to remove the wrinkles in this swimsuit. Not only the wrinkles, but the little jewels that are at the top. All of these wrinkles, all of this stuff, you're to remove all of that.
With what we learned today?
So, say what?
With what we learned today?
So, there are multiple raw files, and puppet warping plays a big role in this. I'll see you guys next week.